Shepherd University is going to be doing a program called Pathways to Lasting Peace in the Middle East. And this is going to take place in the Stower Ballroom on April the 2nd. Next week, it'll go from 7 p.m. until 9. The doors open at 6:30. They'll have some light refreshments served as well. And they invite you to join them to engage in a constructive dialogue about the current situation in the Middle East and how we can educate and advocate for peace. So Faye Stump, who has worked with us in the past to put programs together on this TV station and show and the radio station, approached me about possibly doing a radio program in advance of this to help promote it and to get a good discussion going. And it seemed like a pretty good idea. So Faye put this together for us, and we're happy to welcome in studio Philip Farah, Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace. Philip, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming in. And you brought us some treats, too.
That's right.
Yeah, what's inside the package?
It's called harissa.
What is that?
Palestinian, Syrian, Lebanese pastry made of coconut and farina wheat and all kinds of goodies. Butter. It's very good.
I'm going to open it up, take a look at it here, too.
And Faye made it.
Faye made it.
Thank you, Faye, for arranging this.
Oh, yeah, there's the treats inside there, right?
Yeah. Oh,
very nice. And that's called what again?
Harissa or namura. Harissa, yeah, it's probably easier.
Well, thank you. That was very kind of you to do that. Yeah, also in studio, Reverend Gusti Linnea Newquist from the Shepherdstown Presbyterian Church. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Great to be with you.
Wonderful to have you. Via telephone, Nazar Forsak, a political analyst. Nazar, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And Rudy Kadish, the founder of Rudy on the pronunciation. Is that Tovano?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you
Good
all
morning. Thank you
for being here with
and
us.
The name is Ruti.
Ruti. What did I say? I'm sorry.
Rudy.
Rudy. That's just my own pronunciation. I do have a T in your name.
That's American. That's American.
Yes.
You have to enunciate the T.
Gotcha. Ruti. Gotcha. All right. I'm going to ask you each to take a minute, talk about yourselves for a moment and your involvement in this program. And Philip, since you provided us with food, you get to go first.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Palestinian American from Jerusalem. I was born in 1952, 4 years after what the Palestinians call the Nakba of 1948, when we basically lost our homeland, and the majority of Palestinians were driven out from their homes, including my family, and we ended up in East Jerusalem. And I also have family in Gaza. 3 of my grandparents are from there. I still have relatives actually sheltering in 2 churches in Gaza. It's a very small Christian minority, and maybe later I'll talk about, the kinds of things that they have suffered. I immigrated to the U.S. in 1978, and I started around 2012 a group called Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace, and we work mostly with churches advocating for a just peace in Palestine. I was a government economist, and I retired very recently.
Thank you for coming in, Philip. Gusti,
Thank you.
A little bit about yourself and your involvement in this program.
Thank you. Yes. I began my interest in peace in the Middle East when I was working for the National Presbyterian Church and was invited to attend a peacemaking conference hosted by the Sabeel Center for Palestinian Liberation Theology. And that was when my mind was really open to the reality of what's happening there. Of course, growing up in this country, I really had no idea. But then it became very personal, or I would say pastoral, when I served a church that had a number of Palestinian and Lebanese parishioners. So these are Palestinian Christians in this country. One was a survivor of the Nakba. He was 4 when his family fled Jerusalem. Others from various parts of the region. And so what I like to say is the geopolitical became pastoral. And I had to figure out how to be their pastor in a way that was spiritually nurturing and uplifting, but also that cared about their concerns, their very real life concerns. At the same time, I went to an inter-religious divinity school where I was studying alongside Jews and Christians and other Christian denominations and Muslims and people of all different kinds of religious backgrounds. And we were challenged to, as Christians, especially American Christians, to deconstruct the anti-Judaism of our tradition. And so all of this was happening at the same time, which I think is what a lot of American Christians in particular are struggling with, is how do we have a equal shared concern for the legacy of anti-Judaism that is part of our tradition, while at the same time acknowledging and supporting the very real justice cries of Palestinians. And so I've spent quite a bit of my time thinking theologically and pastorally about that, and including my Master of Divinity thesis was focused on that subject.
Via telephone, Ruti Kadish. Ruti, go right ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm Jewish, Israeli, American also. I've lived here many years, but was born and partially raised in Israel. And I've been involved in Jewish education since living here in the 80s, and been very concerned about the Israel education we provide in the Jewish community, and that it is based on a set of myths and fantasies, and not grounded in reality, that would allow the Jewish community, and especially young people, to hold both their social justice values and their concern for Israel and Israelis. And sadly, it took October 7th and the ensuing war to gain a little bit more traction in the Jewish community to talk differently about Israel and Israel education, and talk about Israel and Palestine. And the program I started writing and am now implementing happened, or was written, was created post October 7th, and is finding a lot of traction now, which I'm very happy about. And I just also want to say that my heart goes out to Philip, and I'm so sorry with what his family is enduring, and also deeply ashamed that this is happening to some degree in my name.
And Nizar Forsak, go right ahead.
Hi, so my name is Nizar. I'm a Palestinian who was born and raised in Dubai in the Gulf. And in 1999, I moved with my parents to Palestine because we thought the Palestinian state was right around the corner. And lived there for 10 years, the last 5 of which were I was working as part of the negotiations team. And in 2008, end of 2008, or beginning of 2009, I moved to the U.S. and I got naturalized in 2015. So now I'm active in advocacy on Palestine, Israel, and I teach negotiations at GW.
Well, thanks to all of you again so much for being part of this program here today. What are you hoping to accomplish at Shepherd University? Philip, we'll go back to you first.
Well, one of the most important things, I think, is to have a discussion around why it is so important for Americans to be concerned about this, because, the media really is not very good at conveying the true picture of what's happening. Like, for example, this morning, even BBC, which many of my friends tell me, portrays what's happening in Gaza and in the rest of the occupied Palestinian territories more accurately than other media. There's a story about the attack on the Nasser hospital in Gaza. And, it's really a very, very partial picture of what's happening. It focuses on the killing of a Hamas leader. And it says that there were other casualties. Well, there were at least 5 other people killed who had nothing to do with the Hamas leader, who was the target of the killing. And the whole second floor and the surgery part of the hospital was destroyed. And Nasser Hospital actually, and then it doesn't mention that there were 50 other Palestinians killed by Israel during the 24 hours, I think, preceding. And many of them are children, you know. The Gaza population is very young. So all of this really does not give a accurate picture of what's happening to the American public, and it's very counterproductive. I think it's even counterproductive for Israel, you know, that we give them such a blank check to do this terrible, you know, war on Gaza. Of course, you know, Palestinians have also done terrible things. There is no emancipation movement in history that is pure. You know, even in India, you know, Gandhi was not the whole story. But, you know, to give license to Israel to destroy Gaza totally almost, you know, the whole infrastructure, children, you know, that have been maimed and burned, and no water, no electricity. My, you know, if I'll get a chance, I can talk about my relatives who were killed in Gaza, some by bombing and some by the lack of medicine. But why is it so important? Because it's really a disservice for even the American taxpayer, you know, who's spending so much money, causing more mayhem in the Middle East, and, you know, making the U.S. image very negative in the world. And really, even the Israelis are victims, because imagine how can this happen to your neighbors and they're going to love you? It's going to be a situation of more enmity and more hatred, you know, in a vital part of the world that's really important for all of us, for its strategic purpose, for its strategic location, for its energy resources, etc. And this is not the way.
Gusty, what are you hoping to accomplish at Shepherd University for this program?
For myself, I agreed to be part of this panel for a lot of reasons, but right now I'm thinking of about three. The first is to acknowledge the journey that I think a lot of just sort of average Americans have to go through, which is a lot of my journey, which is you sort of know something is going on over there, but you don't really know why it should matter to you personally. And then once we learn as Philip suggested, the intensity of our government and the fact that those bombs are U.S. bombs that fall on his family, and that while a lot of people here in the United States would like to say, and I've even had it said to me as a pastor, oh, I don't really want to take sides. Well, we've already taken sides through our government. We have supported at the UN. We have kept resolutions from holding Israel accountable for the occupation from being passed. We have supported through our tax dollars this horrific, some people call genocide in Gaza. And so we have a moral obligation, I guess, is where I would come as a pastor, to say that this is happening, as Rudy said, in some ways in our name, and that therefore we not only have we have a moral obligation to say that this is not just. I think Philip is right that there's this sort of desire, this need to say, well, both sides have done wrong, and that's true. At the same time, both sides are not equal geopolitically, and in this moment, we have in this country one group of protesters who are being literally deported for a slogan of "from the river to the sea," because that's anti-Semitic, but it is in fact Israel that controls the river to the sea. So we don't have actual understanding of what's going on. So part of this is to help people like me come to some understanding, some awareness, but then also to search ourselves and say, are we okay with this being done in our name? And I don't think we can be.
Rudy?
Yes, I think what I'd like people to leave with is the understanding that this is not a zero-sum game, and that no one will ever, or people have studied this conflict for years and written dissertations, myself included, right? And so in this 2-hour conversation, people are not going to come away with all the knowledge, and there's always going to be someone who's going to one-up you on the knowledge. But if there's a basic understanding that this is not a zero-sum game, that there's an equal number or almost an equal number of Jews and Palestinians living between the river and the sea, the Jews aren't going anywhere, the Palestinians aren't going anywhere, and either we solve this for both people or we solve it for neither. So if people understand that it has to be, if you want to be pro-Palestinian, you have to be pro-Israel, and if you want to be pro-Israel, you have to be pro-Palestinian, then that would be a big step forward in understanding that whatever policy is implemented, it has to be one that promotes a solution for both peoples. And to some extent, I think this somewhat echoes what Philip was saying, in that what's happening is not good for the Jews either, or for Israel, and people need to understand that.
Thank you, Ruti. Nizar.
Well, yeah, I think one of the key things for people to understand is, of course, it didn't start on October 7th, and just the scale of the action-reaction. Yes, there are two sides, but as was mentioned, they're not the same. A lot of the action is precisely because of the fear and the feeling that the political process is not delivering. And that's why people are resorting to other measures. And with in desperate times, people resort to desperate measures, right? Like if you count the total tonnage of bombs that were dropped on Gaza is equal to at least 4 atomic bombs. It's really amazing that the world is not trying to stop this war, despite all of this carnage. So rather than putting blame, I think it's more important to just bring the conversation back on how do we resolve the issue. Too many people are fine with the status quo. That's the main challenge, I believe.
We'll have questions for all of our panelists, and for those of you on the phone, if you have not all of you will be asked the same question. If you do have a point where you'd like to comment on an answer or a question that was on the phone, and you're on the phone, please speak up and say, hey, I'd like to address that. And in studio here, just raise your hand and say, I'd like a chance to answer that too. So Bill Stubblefield, go right ahead with the first question. Or your first question.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. I look at the title of the seminar, Pathways to Lasting Peace. That's so aspirational, and it's in fact it's so aspirational to the point I question whether it's practical or not. Also, I look at the makeup of the panelists, and I know very little about you except what I read on the brochure and what you've just answered. And it's, if anything, my observation is your sympathies lie more with the Palestinian cause than the Israeli cause. Now, I may have been, and Gusty said I'm wrong on that, but that's just the impression I have with this. How do you, and I guess my related question is, it is aspirational, and you're trying to raise their awareness, and man, there's been a lot of awareness, just the media the last couple of 3 years. Why choosing a forum such as Shepherd University where it is not the forefront of visibility?
Gusty, why don't you go first, because you were the first one to disagree with Bill and his summation there.
Yeah. I would actually piggyback off of Ruti that in order to be pro-Israeli, you have to understand the reality of the history. I'm looking forward to learning more about her work with I believe she calls it a dual narrative approach, because that seems to be, from my perspective, the real challenge is that we have narratives that we have narratives that are not necessarily accurate, that are leading to what people think it is to be pro-Israeli. Of course, like any situation, you have multiple perspectives, so it's not just two sides. There's multiple perspectives on how to go about any kind of issue. And I guess I would just refer back to, my master's work was on that very question of how do you have concern for both of these very strong justice issues. So in terms of, being more pro-Israeli than pro-Israel, or I'm sorry, more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israel, I would say it's more nuanced than that. The second question, I think, was aspirational, or what aspirational, and then why
but you're
Shepherd?
Yeah, why Shepherd?
Because that's where we are. I mean, that's where we are. We are here, right here in the Eastern Panhandle, and here's where we have to organize. Back to that old slogan, think globally, act locally, or something like that. I guess I certainly understand that there may be other ways and other pathways to do that, but even in my congregation, you have people who, want to care and want to be educated, but aren't. And we're a pretty educated congregation. So why not Shepherd is, I guess, the response I would have to that. And then in terms of the aspiration, if we don't have a goal in mind, then what are we doing?
Fair point. John?
I first became aware of Palestine when I was a very young man, a boy, actually, 1972 Olympics, with the tragedy that was there. And there's been drumbeat after drumbeat after drumbeat of terrorism and of violence and hostage taking and explosions. October 7th, 1,600 people doing nothing. Mutilated, their bodies paraded on television and through the streets by a group whose primary goal is the destruction of Israel. That's it. That's the goal. We're not done until Israel is destroyed. Now, on the flip side, Israel has pledged to destroy Hamas. That's the goal. First of all, and we've only got a couple minutes before commercial, I guess, but where's the opportunity for compromise, and how can there not be violence? If those are our positions, mutual destruction. I'm going to kill you. No, I'm going to kill you. How can there be peace?
We have 1 minute left. That's a difficult question to tackle in 1 minute. So let's kind of let that ruminate around as we go into our commercial break here. And it's a pretty important question. So we'll give all four of you a chance to answer that one too when we get back from the commercial break. Sound like a good idea to everybody over here?
Yes.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
All right, don't go away. We'll be right back with all four of our guests here. We certainly appreciate their participation in our event today on the show. And don't forget that all four of these folks on April the 2nd will be at the store Baldwin and Shepherd University, 210 North King Street. And that'll go from 7 until 9 o'clock. Pathways to Lasting Peace in the Middle East. Back with more in a moment. In studio with the Admiral Bill Stubblefield.
Rob, good morning.
New York Times bestselling author John Gilstrap.
Happy Monday.
And our panelists who will be at Shepherd University on April 2 for Pathways to Lasting Peace in the Middle East. In studio, we have Philip Farah and the Reverend Gusty Linnea Newquist. Thank you for being with us for this full hour. And via telephone, Nazar Farsak and Ruti Kadish, who are with us, hopefully still via telephone. John, restate your question quickly, then we'll go to our guests on the phone first.
Yeah, the question is, when we're talking about pathways to peace in the Middle East, how is that even possible when the belligerents in this case, Hamas and Israel, are mutually devoted to the total destruction of the other party? That's their stated goals.
Ruti, you first.
Yes. So, there are extremists on both sides. There are, while I will sort of step aside a second from Netanyahu's government want to eradicate Hamas, there are also extremists, further extremists. The Ben-Gvirs and the Smotriches and their followers, and the ones who are wanting to settle Gaza and Lebanon and probably the other side of the Jordan River. But that's not the majority. And I would say that, we have to sideline those people, the well-meaning people who are willing to negotiate, who realize this is not a zero-sum game, who realize that living is more important than a cause or an extra piece of land or what have you. That we have to elevate those people, and that has not happened. And also, just to sort of on a more practical note, that I grew up as a Israeli, as a Jew, as I grew up under this. One of the myths I grew up on was that the Arabs never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. That was something we said over and over in this sort of disdaining kind of way. Well, I would say that's the case also for Jews and Israelis, and there have been and continue to be peace plans on the table. If it's the 2002 Arab peace plan, and recently the plan advanced by Egypt and Jordan with cooperation from the PA, from the Palestinian Authority, there are plans on the table that could be negotiated around and discussed seriously in a serious manner, and they're not. From the Israeli side, but Netanyahu is completely ignoring those because he has no interest in that. So I think that, yes, there are extremists on both sides, but those folks could be sidelined if there was political will and motivation in the center.
Nizar?
Well, it's pretty simple. I teach negotiations, and the first thing we learn in negotiations is not to get stuck on the position, what people are asking for, what people are demanding, but actually think of and discuss why they want it. Hamas is just the newest iteration of Palestinians who have lost faith that there is any diplomatic negotiations with people who have taken their land. So Hamas is a result. It's not the cause of the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. As Ruthie just said earlier, we need to have people focused on a solution. Any faction, not only Palestine, Israel, but also Egypt, the U.S., all the Iran, any faction, any group that is helping bringing things together should be supported and highlighted, and any faction, any group that is trying to undermine a peace deal should be boycotted and put in their place. I mean, that is the real problem, is that there is so much complacency with bad actors and so little support for people who are actually making a difference, like Combatants for Peace and other groups that are Palestinian and Israeli groups who are, even having lost loved ones, know that there is no military solution. Now, the Palestinians and the Israelis also are coming from a place of fear. Each side is afraid of the other and doesn't trust that the other doesn't have intentions towards them. Again, this has to do with perceptions. If we get to the bottom of why Hamas wants to destroy Israel and show a credible platform or pathway to achieve Palestinian liberation and equal human rights and security for Israeli and Jewish citizens as Jews, right? That they can feel safe being Jewish, they don't need to hide their identity, then Hamas will cease to have any reason to exist. Its raison d'etre is because it believes that the only way to achieve freedom is to destroy Israel.
Do you have a follow-up for that, John?
I do. I mean, I hear that the political extremists could be sidelines if we could have the political will. There's kind of an academic element to this exercise in a very, very dynamic, real situation. People are fearful because they're shooting at each other, and that's a very fearful time. As a practical matter, right now, people are dying, and not by few. They're dying by a lot. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what do you do? Let's assume there's a 30-day clock on this, because sooner or later you run out of people, or you run out of the will to fight. So if you got a 30-day clock, 60-day, pick a number. There's a finite clock. What's the string you pull to make this stop? And there's a kind of a follow-on to that from the U.S. perspective. At what point does it stop being worth American blood and treasure to watch these people, these two groups, the Israelis and Palestinians or Hamas, not cooperate with each other, not interested in compromise.
Rob, before the answer, I'd like to put a kind of a different twist. I think saying the same thing as what John's saying. And I do not believe this philosophy, but I hear people say, when do we go from a resolution to a confinement? In other words, because the location, the geography, it could spread to become a global issue rather than a regional issue. We have not been successful in resolving the problem when we start looking at it as opposed to confinement as opposed to resolution.
Bill, you're looking at Philip, so let's just go to Philip and see where it starts.
I mean, if I may backtrack a little bit, one issue is, you asked why Shepherdstown University, my group, the Palestinian Christian Alliance for Peace, invite us anywhere, and we will be happy to attend. And we can also team up with Israelis like Ruti and others, and we have. Miko Peled came to your church, and I was a discussant with Miko Peled in other churches and other locations. And Ruti has invited me to a synagogue in D.C. But I'd like to also backtrack to something that John said about Palestinians in October 7 murdering 1,600 Israelis. That is really not accurate at all. And the whole question of babies being pulled out, put in ovens to bake and hung on clotheslines and beheaded, that has been absolutely defunct. And recently, the Israeli intelligence came up with its report evaluating what happened on October 7th and validated the observations by many sources that Israel activated the Hannibal Directive and that many of the Israelis who were killed on October 7th were actually killed by Israeli armed forces, that the Hannibal Directive is a directive that says that you won't take hostages at any price. The hostages should not reach Gaza, even if that means that the vehicles in which they're being transported are destroyed. And indeed, there are photos that I have seen, even in the Israeli media, of scores of burnt-out vehicles. The Palestinian Hamas did not have that kind of weaponry that would completely incinerate cars, and so many of the people were killed. I'm not defending, but it's also true that like I said earlier, in every emancipation movement, in India, for example, Gandhi was not the only game in town. There was also Subhas Chandra Bose, and whose movement killed a lot of British civilians and others. In Kenya, the Mau Mau rebellion, also the Mau Mau did some ugly things. But that doesn't mean that I stand with the British who are colonizing and who are taking the land of the indigenous people. The same with the Nat Turner rebellion. The Nat Turner rebellion of slaves in the United States, they did some ugly things. That doesn't mean that slavery is right, and ethnic cleansing is not right. And the terror that the Palestinians have faced is by far greater than the terror that any Palestinian party has inflicted on the Israelis, and I'm absolutely not justifying that. It is, I agree fully with Ruti, it's not a zero-sum game. But maybe there are different narratives which we have to hear them, but I'm very partisan. I'm partisan for justice for both. I'm not anti-Israeli. I'm not and I don't appreciate people being anti-Palestinian. I appreciate, a position of being with justice and with peace, and the path towards that is clear, that there should not be ethnic cleansing, that there should not be mass murder of children, and attacks on hospitals and on United Nations personnel and on hundreds of journalists who have been killed. It's unbelievable how much there has been of that.
Well,
And that's not terrorism.
well, from where I'm agnostic on these things. I really am, because if peace is the goal, take you literally, if peace is the goal, give back the hostages and stop fighting, surrender. Okay, we're done. Now you have peace. So the pathway to peace in the Middle East is to stop fighting. But that's not what they're suing for. They want is a pathway for a victory to have some form of Palestinian state that Israel is not going to fight against, which is a whole different thing than a pathway to peace. Right? If peace is the goal, peace is easy.
Gusty, you're shaking your head no.
That's a misunderstanding of peace. So biblically, we are warned against crying peace, peace when there is no peace. Peace biblically does not happen with the absence of justice. And so just to stop fighting doesn't bring peace. There has to be an active way of bringing about a way of life, as Ruti has suggested, that allows people to continue to live with access to their own water, with access to land, with mobility, with citizenship. Right now we have a system where even if we just stopped fighting, there are Palestinians who are literally basically stateless. So just stopping the fighting does not bring about peace. There has to be a true pathway for people to be able to live with human rights and dignity.
Well, I think just two states.
I'm not going to take the Presbyterian Church has taken a position, the National Church, that a two-state solution. A lot of people think that's not possible anymore because, as you said, of the reality on the ground. But I think the best response I heard to what the quote solution should be is that truly is the decision of the actors involved. And I think I would go back to your question of sort of why don't we just contain it and keep, or they can't get along, so we should just stop caring. Well, the problem is United States doesn't want them to stop fighting. There's too many interests, corporate interests, military interests in the United States that don't want a just peace. So we have to look at ourselves. We can't just say, oh, it's their problem. Those terrible people can't get along. This is a long journey for all of us to think about what true peace looks like.
Why are there no allies for the Palestinians among the other Arab states? Why are they not being accepted? Why are the borders closed?
On the contrary, the vast majority of Arabs support the Palestinians.
I know, but
maybe the governments don't.
But the borders are closed, right? I mean, so they're not accepting Palestinians in flight or not. And
because they reject the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from their land. I mean, it's simple.
Nizar, they bring you back in too.
Ethnic cleansing is a wrong thing.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, several Israeli leaders, and not just today, like for decades, have specifically said that they want the Palestinians out. So the Arab countries know that very well. They're not interested in implementing Israeli or Zionist goals of ethnic cleansing. That's the main thing, because what happened in 1948 is the refugees left or were expelled, and when they tried to come back, they were shot at. And that's the main problem of the refugees is that Israel has refused their right to come back to their homes to which they have keys. So the Arabs learned the lesson that Israel does not respect international law when it comes to the right of refugees. So they're not going to compound the problem and make more Palestinians refugees.
The program is called Pathways to Lasting Peace in the Middle East. It is April 2 at the Store Ballroom at Shepherd University between 7 and 9. And Shepherd, by the way, is not sponsoring this particular event. They're providing the ballroom for it to be held. Bill Stubblefield, you get what might time out to be the final question.
Well, simple question. You need reservations to attend. The first 150, I think, attend. So if you're interested, give them the access. Where do you go, Rob?
To rent.
To make a reservation.
To make a reservation. Yeah. We'll get that information out.
Okay,
I don't have that specifically handy at the moment. So, John, I'll default back to you.
Now, my heart bleeds for this situation because whenever you see two parties that seem not to be interested in their own peaceful solution, and you see the surrogate parties, the United States is involved, Russia's involved at some level. I'm sure Iran is involved because if there's war, Iran's throwing stuff in there somewhere. And I just think it's fundamentally sad. And I think this is true. There's somewhere in here, there's an analogy to the Ukrainian situation where you've got a lot of blood, you've got a lot of misery, you've got a lot of discomfort and a lot of pain, and just not a lot of no really good solutions to come out of it. And as people talk about it and debate about it and spend money on it, people continue to die. And I just think it's fundamentally very sad.
Any comments on that one, Philip? Do you want to go?
Ruti, we'd like to hear
Ruti, go right ahead.
Point of view, but I'd also like to say something if possible after.
Ruti?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed it. Dropped out for a second. Was there a question there, or just final comment?
May I
More of a comment? Yeah, go right ahead,
Maybe then Ruti can. The demonization of Hamas is really not helpful. When Hamas started, Sheikh Mahmoud Yassin was the leader at the time, a Palestinian cleric, and Israel actually welcomed the Hamas movement because it was an alternative at the time to the PLO that was at the time demonized in the West. And now the PLO, Abu Mazen, Abbas, the president of the Palestinian entity, is of course accepted by all parties. But Sheikh Mahmoud Yassin at the time had the idea of a long-term truce with Israel, and his ideology was that the whole Muslim world has to be reformed before we deal with the Palestinian question. And so Israel actually welcomed that. And at many junctures in the history of Hamas, this is something that you won't see in the media. Hamas actually accepted a two-state solution. In 2017, it backtracked, it withdrew its original charter, which did call for the destruction of Israel, and replaced it with a much more accepting resolution. Principles. It stopped, calling for the elimination of the state of Israel. At many junctures, it accepted a two-state solution. It said, if the PA, the Palestinian Authority, is able to negotiate a two-state solution, we will accept that. And at every juncture when that happened, Israel did something to jeopardize the situation. I remember very distinctly the Jewish Forward, which is one of the oldest Jewish publications and one of the most respected in the United States. I remember them writing about this and saying that at the time it was Ariel Sharon, the Prime Minister of Israel, that he, in response to Hamas overture for a long-term truce, and stopping attacks on civilians from both sides. Attacks on civilians certainly are, there have been attacks on civilians from the Palestinian side, but they are minuscule compared to the number of Palestinian civilians who have been killed. The Jewish Forward mentioned the response of Hamas calling for a long-term truce. Ariel Sharon at the time bombed a building in Gaza with many, many people being killed and jeopardized any movement toward. There are so many situations where The Arab side, for example, the Saudi peace plan.
About 15 seconds, Philip.
The Saudi peace plan was saying, let's agree on a two-state solution, and then all the Arab countries will have peace with Israel in exchange. And Israel outright rejected it.
If you'd like to attend this event April the 2nd, you can email Eastern Panhandle Team at gmail.com. They'll give you the link to register. There's a QR code for it that you can get off the official pamphlets and information and such. Final minute next.